Hi everyone, I'm Isha. I'm the editor-in-chief of Scientia, and I'm here with Savannah, author of Phenotypic Behaviors of Fragile X Syndrome and Fmr1 mice on the C57BL6 background strain. And we're going to talk a little bit about her research. So what was the purpose of this research?
So the main purpose of the research was to provide further validation of the adult behavioral phenotype of those Fmr1 mouse models on the C57BL6 background strain. And we wanted to do this in both males and females. Some studies, mainly focus on males, but for Dr. Lugo's lab, we try to focus on females as well because that research has been lacking in the past couple of years, and so we've been trying to, focus more on females. So that's why we included females in the study, and we wanted to make sure that validation can be allowed for further insight into Fragile X syndrome behavioral phenotypes in humans.
Awesome. And then what was your hypothesis?
So our hypothesis focused on two things. One thing would be the Fragile X syndrome behavioral phenotypes, and another thing was past research on the Fmr1 mouse model in the same background strain and what they found. So mostly what we hypothesized we would find an increase in anxiety levels and a decrease in sensory motor gating abilities. And sensory motor gating abilities is mostly just a filter to filter out unnecessary stimuli in one's environment. And we believe that we would find an increase in depressive behavior, an increase in learning and memory deficits, as well as an increase in repetitive behavior in both males and females.
Great. And then what was your conclusion?
So, what we found was we actually found a decrease in anxiety in both males and females. And then we also found an increase in sensory motor gaining abilities, but just in males. And that's interesting because it was definitely different than what we thought it would be, because we thought we would have a decrease in sensory motor gaining abilities. And we didn't find any significant differences in depression or in deficits in learning and memory. However, we did find an increase in repetitive behavior for males. However, we didn't find a lot of differences in females. And so, that increases the need for more research on those female mouse models.
Awesome. And then how would you expand this research in the future if you could?
So I would mainly focus on females. For if I did research this again or do a slightly different research, I would definitely look at females more and maybe just have a study just focusing on females and not focusing on males or comparing females of different strains and different things like that. Because in humans, there are differences in females in their symptoms with Fragile X syndrome versus males, and sometimes the difference is, very subtle, um, you know, but and so I'm wondering if the mouse also has those subtle differences in the females and the males. So I believe focusing just on the females for another research may be better in that we can, look at those differences specifically and maybe those differences can be highlighted more and we can see any significant differences in, depressive behavior or learning and memory deficits or repetitive behavior, anything like that.
Great. And then what was your favorite part of conducting this research?
So, my favorite part of conducting this research was the statistics part of it. And I know that's the hardest part in a lot of people's opinion. Um, as well as I did like running the tests themselves. However, I did also like the statistics because I was able to see what I was doing really, because when you test, the mice, it gets very repetitive, and you don't really appreciate, what you're doing. And then when you go into the statistics, you realize, wow, like every number counts, and every subject counts. Like if a subject is tested in one way and then different in another way, then you can't use them and different things like that. So by doing statistics really helps you appreciate, the testing, and really appreciate your research.
Yeah, awesome. And then lastly, what advice would you give to any aspiring student researchers?
So my main advice would be to get into a lab as soon as you can. And getting into a lab is, you know, it's fairly easy. 'Cause you can email professors and different things like that. That's what I did. I emailed a lot of professors, and a lot of them were taking it, and a lot of them weren't taking students. And so that's basically what I did. And I would definitely recommend that, because the sooner you get into a lab, the more experience you get, and you can just build on that experience. Because if you go into a lab, a professor's not going to have you write a paper, the first year you're in the lab. So if you're in there for, maybe 2 years, then the professor would allow you to write a paper, and then that can really help you into graduate school, medical school, whatever you'd like to do. And I also recommend, for future researchers, is to pay attention in the classes that relate to the complicated stuff, such as statistics and research methods and different things like that, because those are very important. And if you go into a lab and you say, well, I don't know how to do any of these statistics, I don't know what you're talking about, and that can put you at a really big disadvantage. So I know statistics is hard, but if you work hard at it and you put the effort in it, it will pay off. And then another advice I would give is to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and to, if you're in a lab and you're passionate about the something doesn't sit right, or you look at something and you're like, I don't really understand, or maybe you just don't think it's right, don't be afraid to go to the professor and say, hey, I feel this way, I don't know if this is right or if this is wrong, but I don't feel it's right, help me to understand it. Professors will really appreciate it, and asking questions will get you very far. So,
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much, Savannah.
mhm.